truly achieve immortality? Or will they be outlived by other memorials to mankind? This is just part of a journey that will take us to the future of once crowded cities, as well as haunting sites already devoid of man. Welcome to Earth. Population 0. One day after people. Without humans to maintain them, power plants across the world start shutting down. Lights go out. Clocks stop. But the race is on to see who or what can survive the longest in the hostile world of a life after people. Around the world, the mummies of many of Egypt's pharaohs lie not in tombs deep inside pyramids, but beneath the plexiglass of modern museums. One day after people, the electronic temperature and humidity controls that mimic the cool, dry environment where the mummies once resided shut down.
The bodies that have been left in the tombs in Egypt have lasted 3,000 years or more. If the conditions are just perfect for the body, I can't see why it couldn't last another 3,000 years. But if the conditions at the museum fail, the body would start to decay immediately. You have high humidity, you have mold spores in the air at all times, so they would first probably be attacked by mold and bacteria.
How long can these mummies last? We shall see. One month after people. More than 100 bodies kept in suspended animation at the world's cryonics facilities are still in a deep freeze. According to experts, even a month-long power outage won't cause the bodies to thaw. They are kept at a temperature of minus 320 degrees Fahrenheit by liquid nitrogen, which doesn't rely on electricity to maintain its frigid temperature. But there's a problem. Liquid nitrogen boils off slowly. In the time of humans, the supply had to be replenished every few weeks. With no one left to restock the crucial refrigerant, the bodies begin to warm up. Once they reach minus 184 degrees Fahrenheit, chemical reactions resume, and the natural processes of decomposition take over.
In the cells are enzymes and fluids. These break down quickly. The cell wall is broken down by enzymes. They leak out. As soon as the temperature started to go up, the body would just accelerate in the decaying process.
For these human beings, the bid for immortality is coming to an end. And should some future intelligence wish to recreate humanity, they will find no help in the laboratories left behind by man. There are approximately 400,000 human embryos currently frozen in clinics in the United States alone. They, along with all the egg and sperm samples in the world, quickly decay as their supplies of liquid nitrogen run out. Man's DNA still has a chance for survival. 200 miles above the Earth, up in the International Space Station, rests a computer disk called the Immortality Drive. Delivered into orbit in October 2008, The immortality drive contains the digitized DNA information of a highly eclectic group, including physicist Stephen Hawking, comedian Stephen Colbert, and Playboy model Joe Garcia. It's the brainchild of Richard Garriott, a video game producer from Houston, who hoped alien beings might someday use the DNA data to reconstruct and extinct humanity. The immortality drive may be man's best shot at preserving the species in a life after people. But we will see if it can really last forever. Art was another way for man to achieve immortality, creating images that would last through the ages. But many masterpieces require protection in controlled environments. In the time of humans, Michelangelo's magnificent frescoes on the ceiling of the Vatican Sistine Chapel were protected by more than 20 miles of pipes, pumps, valves, and wiring. To prevent the fresco plaster from absorbing too much water from the air, the humidity was kept at between 50 and 60%. Air filters removed even microscopic particles of dust. It was all controlled by computer. But without electricity, the system has closed down forever. But 3 months after people, the disappearance of humans is actually helping the frescoes. Without the annual press of 2 million tourists, there are no ascending currents of human body heat. The figures painted on the ceiling, including God and Adam, are safe, at least for now. Six months after people, while nature is attacking some of the bodies and structures left behind, she preserves others. In the barren wastes of Ross Island in Antarctica, there are huts that were used in the early 1900s by the explorers Robert Scott and Ernest Shackleton. Here, with an average temperature of 3 below zero, the ravages of decay have been slowed. Inside and out, the huts remain frozen in time.
With the severe cold in Antarctica, a lot of the insects that would gnaw away at the wood structure don't exist there. And the fungus, the mold, doesn't exist there.
Cans of beef from 1917 sit on the shelves.
These cans, they'll last 2-3 more centuries, easily.
Meat still hangs on metal hooks, appearing quite edible, even after almost a century. In some cases, extreme cold has preserved flesh for thousands of years.
In the 1928 Explorers Club meeting in Paris, they ate mastodon. Some mastodon came up through the ice, and they got it, they cooked it up, and they served it at the dinner. And I had a friend there, and I asked him, I said, how did it taste? And he said, well, it tasted a lot like rotten meat. But it's been buried in the ice for 10,000 years, and it would, but it's edible.
While Antarctic cold would preserve the explorers' huts for many years, it's the more temperate parts of the globe that most of mankind called home. Cities like Houston and Boston, where the artifacts of man face a much harsher fate. In Boston Harbor, sits one of the most storied ships in American history. The USS Constitution, first launched in 1797, is the world's oldest commissioned warship still afloat. During the War of 1812, cannonballs were seen bouncing off the ship's 25-inch thick wooden hull, earning her the nickname Old Ironsides. But even Old Ironsides is defenseless in this race to survive, along with most of what man has built. Nine months after People, the race to see what survives is becoming more intense. In Boston, a military relic is about to lose its final battle. The hull of Old Ironsides may be tough enough to repel a cannonball, but it can't withstand the constant infiltration of water.
Wooden ships leak. The wood starts leaking almost immediately. The wood will shrink, the wood will expand, the wood will rot.
In the time of humans, automatic bilge pumps drained 900 gallons of water a day from the ship. But those pumps stopped months ago. This flooding alone won't be enough to drag the ship underwater. It will take the Boston winter to finally do what enemy warships never could.
Waves might wash over the deck and might force it further under. In a world without people, maybe the Constitution would remain afloat for a year, maybe less.
3 years after People, the International Space Station still orbits above the Earth. But without constant recalibration from terrestrial stations or boosts from space shuttles, the ISS loses 2 miles of altitude each month. As it drops from its original height of 200 miles to below 160 miles, the orbital decline accelerates until it re-enters the atmosphere, where air and friction join with gravity, and the space station burns. Incinerated in the descent. Perhaps the final hope of reconstructing the human species. The digitized DNA of the immortality drive proves to be quite mortal after all. Five years into a life after People, weeds transform the historic streets of Boston.
If you just leave the gutters and rain spouts not maintained, plants will take root in little cracks in the brick and little cracks in the mortar.
They now attack Boston's Old North Church. This is where lanterns warned Paul Revere of a British invasion. Now, the natural world has invaded and conquered.
If the windows blow out, you'll have rain coming in, you'll have pigeons coming in, you'll have animals coming in. You'll also have vines starting to grow, or the maple tree sending its shoots in here. They'll sprout up in the rotting wood.
"20 years after People, nature conquers the subtropical city of Houston in a different way. The tallest building in Texas now looms over a city that is slowly reverting back to the swamp it once was. Once kept at a steady 72 degrees, Houston's great domed sports stadiums now swelter to 125 degrees in the summer. They have become enormous bat caves. The artificial grass of the Astrodome's trademark AstroTurf is swallowed up by reeds and muck. Feasting on insects, the bats make their own contribution to the new ecosystem. Their excrement, or guano.
Guano has a lot of nutrients in it. And so what you have is you'll have insects that feed on fungus, bringing in predators that eat on those insects that eat the fungus.
25 years without people have not been kind to the mummies housed in the world's great museums. With no one around to regulate heat and humidity, mold struck first, then insects.
Mites would probably be the first insect you would see destroying a mummified body. After the mites eat the decayed body, it would start to break down the fibers. It would start to turn into dust.
Great kings like Ramses II and Tutankhamun are now reduced to skeletons. In the 20th century, some embalmers tried for a more lifelike presentation. The corpse of Lenin was preserved for decades in Moscow. The process was a state secret, but it was rumored to have involved repeated baths in formaldehyde, ethanol, and methanol. Russian experts were always on duty to protect Lenin's body, scrubbing away bacteria, closing up openings in the flesh, and lightening blemishes.
His body is treated with makeup so that he appears like he did 30 years ago. But the process of decay underneath that makeup and underneath that wax is still taking place. It can be slowed down, but the process of decay never stops.
With no people to tend to it, Lenin's body goes the way of the rotting pharaohs. "35 years after people, the wooden steeple of Boston's 18th century Old North Church is on the verge of collapse.
The steeple, being taller, is going to be more susceptible to a big storm than the rest of the building. It would fall sooner.
The once guiding light of the American Revolution has been extinguished. 35 years after people is long enough to turn coastal cities like Boston into ghostly wrecks. How do we know this? It's a future that has already happened in a place nearly 7,000 miles from Boston. This island was the most densely populated place on Earth until man disappeared. "35 years after people, our homes, offices, factories are cracking and sagging as nature executes its hostile takeover. This is a future that has already come to pass in one remote corner of the world. Several miles off Japan's southwestern coast, a forsaken island stands lifeless and decaying.
This island, as you can see, is a slab of concrete sitting in the middle of the ocean with high-rise buildings sprouting from it. Completely empty, no one living here anymore. No electricity, no vegetation, nothing.
It's called Hashima Island, once a thriving coal mining town and home to thousands of people. Now, its abandoned offices and apartment buildings are literally exploding under nature's relentless hands.
The island has been left literally to the elements all these years, exposed completely. And the wind is carrying all the seawater up into the buildings. The degradation is just startling and remarkable.
Because of the unsafe conditions, Hashima is strictly off limits to visitors. Beginning in the 1890s, Japan's Mitsubishi company mined coal from the seafloor beneath Hashima. At its peak in 1959, the 15-acre island was home to more than 5,000 workers and their families. The highest recorded population density on Earth. In 1974, as Japan began favoring petroleum over coal, Mitsubishi closed the mine and relocated the entire population to the mainland. 35 years later, nothing remains but decayed buildings and ghostly memories.
What does a city look like after all the people are gone? This is a Hashima version of life after people. This isn't a war zone. It was one of the busiest thoroughfares on the island. There was once a row of stores along here with wooden shutters. All of the lumber is collapsed onto the ground. The concrete walling has fallen. The metal netting is strewn along the ground. It's the effects of 35 years of wind and rain. Once one of the busiest places on the island, now is just completely silent.
These rooms once echoed with the laughter of children playing. Now, all that remains are the corroded, rusty remnants of their toys. Overgrown and forgotten, the school playground is now rusted scrap metal. Hashima is a laboratory for showing what happens to reinforced concrete in a savage environment. Every year, the typhoon season delivers rain and winds of up to 100 miles per hour, while huge ocean waves smash directly into buildings.
In the case of this building, we have an iron frame and steel reinforced parts. As you can see, the front part of this pillar is damaged, while the backside isn't. It tells you that the surface is damaged by salt water, wind, and rain.
Scientific studies of concrete core samples revealed that the buildings most exposed to the ocean had a salt content 15 times greater than the others. The concrete buildings themselves gave the island a warlike profile, and even a new nickname, Battleship Island.
Hashima is called Battleship Island because from a distance it literally looks like the shape of a battleship. The similarity is so uncanny, in fact, it was actually torpedoed during World War II by American submarines.
Dotoku Sakamoto lived on the island as a young boy. His former home is on the 9th floor of a building that once housed 300 families in tiny apartments.
This was our room that we used until 1974.
Yes.
There were 5 family members living in this house. And there was my private room and a balcony over there.
The wooden facades and balconies were quickly destroyed. The many passageways and stairs that connected the buildings are now falling apart.
This is the Jigoku-dan, the steps of hell, so named because they're so steep. The buildings of Hashima are high-rises of up to 9 stories in height. And so people living on the island had to negotiate stairs like this on a daily basis. There wasn't a single elevator or escalator anywhere on the island, so you can see where the name comes from. Originally, Hashima was just a bare rock without any vegetation sitting in the middle of the ocean. And by artificial means, it was turned into a human community. But in reality, it's just that, a bare rock sitting in the middle of the ocean and lifeless, and it's gone back to lifelessness.
The breathtaking destruction of Hashima Island in just 35 years without people shows that mankind's many bids for immortality face very long odds. Even our great monuments of iron, steel, and stone will be under attack 50 years after people. But could some human remains actually beat the odds? It's been 50 years since the last human voices echoed through the streets, alleys, and hallways of planet Earth. But the words of man aren't quite silenced yet. Tens of thousands of domestic parrots escaped into the wild after humans disappeared, and still retain the words taught to them by their vanished masters.
Parrots are considered one of the smartest creatures on Earth now, up with great apes and dolphins.
Some parrots have learned several hundred words and might keep that vocabulary even without humans to interact with.
A companion parrot that escaped into the wild might have a lifespan, say, of 60 years. Then it'd be very plausible that 50 years later you could still hear human noises in the wild.
So for now, some of the words of mankind will survive. "75 years after people, time and nature are wearing away Boston's monumental Bunker Hill Bridge. The steel and concrete span is held up by 116 steel cables strung from 2 towers.
It's really painting the steel, making sure no corrosion exists, sweeping the debris off the bridge, cleaning out the drainage structures so plants don't grow and the water flows off of the bridge, and sealing the concrete with a moisture-penetrating sealer.
To keep moisture away from the cables, they are surrounded by plastic piping. This also protects them from another source of corrosion.
Bird droppings are amazingly corrosive to a wide range of building materials. It wasn't even fully recognized 20 or 30 years ago.
The waste product of pigeons and starlings contains high levels of ammonia and salt. Mixed with rainwater, the combination triggers a lethal electrochemical reaction. 20 years of bird droppings penetrating the steel of the 8-lane 35W bridge in Minneapolis contributed to its fatal collapse in 2007. After a century, weather and stress have cracked the protective plastic coating on the cables of the Bunker Hill Bridge. Stormwater, some of it mixed with acidic pigeon droppings, has penetrated to corrode the steel. One by one, cables fail. When half the cables go, those that remain cannot support the weight of the roadway. Down the coast in New York, more than 200 years after she was given as a gift of friendship, from the people of France to the people of America, the Statue of Liberty still holds her torch high. This is actually the second torch to be held aloft by Lady Liberty. The first was replaced in the 1980s during a massive restoration project. Now, beneath her copper skin, only as thick as 2 pennies, her skeleton is beginning to fail.
The steel straps that hold the copper to the steel framework would pull away, the rivets would pull away over a period of 100 to 200 years.
Her end is not yet here, but without humans, it is inevitable. In Houston, the domed stadiums have spent 100 years as subtropical paradises. In the time of humans, it cost an estimated $500,000 per year to maintain the Astrodome, the first domed baseball stadium in the world. After a century of neglect, the entire structure is cracking and crumbling. Finally, in great chunks, the 9,000-ton steel and lucite dome comes raining down. "150 years after people leaves Boston looking like an overgrown garden. In the time of humans, the best observation point in the city was from the top of the 60-story John Hancock Tower, the tallest building in New England. But the notorious New England weather has now destroyed the building's outer skin. Corroding steel columns lead to a pancake collapse. The urban jungle is now just jungle. But former cities still echo with familiar words.
Hello?
Although these parrots have never interacted with humans, their ancestors did, and some remnants of human speech have been passed down to them. But our languages will not be immortal. While parrots can pass on human words to their chicks, it has no value for the survival of the species.
I would think the drop-off would be more than 90% per generation. 200 years after the last human, it would be highly unlikely to expect to hear human vocalization in parrots in the wild.
Over 200 years, the tallest building in Texas has had its windows blown out by hurricanes, and its insides corroded by rain.
You have to expect a hurricane in Houston, a good one, a big one, every 4 or 5 years. That's going to create a significant amount of damage to almost any tall building.
Now, the accumulated force of nature will strip the building to its bones.
The steel frame might still be there 200 years later. The rest of the building is gone.
Then, the steel frame itself will corrode and collapse. "1,600 miles away in New York Harbor, the torch of liberty's best hope for immortality might lie beneath the waves." 300 years after people, Lady Liberty suffers a fatal relapse of an old complaint, galvanic corrosion. Her torch-bearing right arm is the first to fall. Then, other parts. But here, on the ocean floor, these shattered symbols of hope may become the fossils of the future.
The hand with the torch would, by that initial ballistic trajectory, embed itself maybe up to half a meter into the mud. And that impression may well stay, just in the way that footprints are preserved in mud and sand.
While one icon of humanity makes a bid for immortality on the ocean floor, the most famous ceiling in the world is barely hanging on. "500 years after people, Michelangelo's frescoes still look down from the Sistine ceiling, where they cover 12,000 square feet of surface. Even though all the frescoes have faded and cracked from changing temperature and humidity. On the wall depicting the Last Judgment, Michelangelo's heavenly sky has faded faster than other sections. The ultramarine pigment comes from lapis lazuli, mined in Tunisia. It was the most precious color in Renaissance art, but also one of the most delicate. The blue color comes from 3 sulfur atoms and an electron, protected by aluminum and silicon atoms. High humidity breaks apart the structure, allowing oxygen to mix with the sulfur, turning the blue to a yellowish gray. Throughout its history, people have tried to clean the frescoes and shore up the chapel itself. But after 5 centuries, the Last Judgment has come.
The walls would weaken. The vault of the roof would push the walls apart.
Exterior bracing buttresses fail, initiating a chain reaction.
Walls would collapse. They'd open like a book. The Sistine ceiling would not be there 1,000 years from now without people. Probably would not be there 500 years from now.
10,000 years after people, almost all traces of human culture are buried beneath vegetation and sand.
10,000 years from now, there would certainly be some things that you would see, pyramids of Egypt perhaps, but very, very little of human existence would actually be recognizable in the absence of humans.
The planet has gotten warmer, even in the coldest places on Earth.
Even in these areas where Scott and Shackleton built their huts, we may well start to see an increase in plant life, possibly even insects, organisms that would begin to increase the rate at which decay would take away those structures. In 10,000 years, it's improbable that those huts will still be there.
In 10,000 years, the Earth itself will have buried most of man's cities. $100 million years after people, dreaming of immortality, man tried to make his mark on the world. But those marks have been erased. In the end, what survives is not what people made, but the simple mineral compounds they were made of.
We possess robust bones made out of calcium phosphate. It's as durable as the bones of dinosaurs. Our teeth are even more durable. The dentine, and particularly the enamel, very hard to break down. So those parts of us will likely survive here and there.
This is the final fate of human bodies. Along with the bridges they stretched across rivers and the buildings they piled up to the sky, art and architecture, aspiration and achievement, all just fragments on the ground in a life after people. What would happen if every human being on Earth disappeared? This isn't the story of how we might vanish. It is the story of what happens to the world we leave behind. In this episode of Life After People, Outbreak, it's what happens when nature is left unchecked. Some animals are attacked by a deadly pandemic. Others break out and go wild. Stealthy enemies are on the march, attacking cities around the world, like they have already hit this city in the heart of America. When nature attacks, the bigger things are, the harder they fall. Welcome to Earth. Population 0. One day after people, those who kept the forces of nature under control have vanished. Nature, long contained, is poised for an outbreak of violence and chaos, disease and disaster. In Chicago, there is no crew to maintain Wrigley Field. Its ultimate opponent, already embedded in the outfield wall. No one to maintain the Sears Tower or John Hancock Center, now standing like giant tombstones. And no one to manage the Chicago River, one of the most heavily engineered waterways in the world. As each day passes, nature begins taking over. Three days after people, a rainstorm hit Chicago. In the time of humans, such a deluge would have been unremarkable. The Chicago River should flow into Lake Michigan, the massive body of water bordering the city. But in 1900, man turned on nature. The river's flow was reversed to prevent pollution of Chicago's drinking water. This left man in firm control of water levels, employing engineering techniques that were later used in building the Panama Canal. In the time of humans, whenever it rained, river engineers managed canal locks and sluice gates to divert the current away from the lake. But now, after more than a century, the river gets its revenge.
In a life without people, we wouldn't be able to anticipate such an event and open gates to manipulate the water levels. The entire river system would fill up gradually, just like water in a bathtub. Initially, it would flood low areas in downtown Chicago and the basements of buildings along the river.
Soon, the high river levels begin surging south along the man-made channels towards the gates of the Lockport Controlling Works, 35 miles downstream. The 109-year-old complex controls the drainage of the Chicago River. That's about to change.
The cascade of water dropping on the downstream side would erode the piers holding the gates up.
The days when man controlled this river are over.
There's about 10 to 20 billion gallons of water behind these gates. When that structure collapses, that wall of water will send a torrent down the Des Plaines River to the city of Joliet, where it would overtop the river walls and flood the center city.
Just days after people, entire towns in the American Midwest are wiped out by raging water. Across the pond in London, time has run out for the iconic Big Ben.
The clock behind me has been working continuously for 150 years now, and that's taken it through extremes of weather, storms, the London Blitz during the Second World War.
But to keep the clock running, it had to be wound 3 times a week. A task that took 2 Royal Clock mechanics several hours to complete with the aid of an electric motor.
If there are no people around, within a matter of days, the clock will stop working for the first time in 150 years, and the chimes will stop chiming.
The clock stops, but the tower remains, at least for now. Due to a construction quirk, it has always leaned 8.6 inches to the northwest. A lean that will only get worse over time. Two weeks after people. Over in the cultured surroundings of Buckingham Palace, the Queen's little corgis don't notice that the chimes no longer ring. In the time of humans, Her Majesty kept up to 5 of the dwarfish dogs. She'd had corgis since 1933. Now, the Queen and her courtiers are gone. The corgis are all alone in what is now just an ornate 775-room prison. The palace's 78 bathrooms provide a life-saving water source. Though these canines have short legs, they reach the toilet water with the aid of their long bodies that allow them to stretch and jump as high as 4 feet. Desperate for food, the corgis find their way to the royal kitchen in Her Majesty's basement, a maze of rooms with food stocks that can last for a few months. After that, the future of the corgis will become much more uncertain. One month into a life after people. Outside Atlanta, an outbreak of kudzu is starting to spread freakishly. The vine was brought to the United States in 1876 from Japan for farmers to feed their animals and for erosion control. It was a mistake.
It grows in bright sunlight and on fertile soils very rapidly. It can grow up to 1 foot a day, so you can have a 60-foot vine where you had nothing.
Known as the vine that ate the South, kudzu has a vast root network that spreads more than 15 feet underground. In the time of humans, it took constant cutting by a 25-man maintenance crew just to keep the roadways clear in Atlanta and the surrounding county.
You have to keep going back and killing the above-ground portion of the plant until you've exhausted the energy reserves in the root system. And considering the size and the depth of those roots, it can be a very difficult job.
With no natural enemies in the region, and no humans to contain it, kudzu starts wreaking havoc. The non-native species starts strangling trees, climbing telephone poles and power lines, covering bridges and roadways, and enveloping rural houses.
It creates a situation that there is nothing growing there but the kudzu. And what you have is literally a dead spot in the environment.
As kudzu thrives, livestock struggles. 60 million hogs are confined on North American farms. In the time of humans, they fed a demand for 51 pounds of pork per American every year. Now, they starve. Pigs in captivity have been known to resort to cannibalism. Months after people, the hogs that survive become frantic. The bigger 500-pound beasts start pushing their way out of their pens. Others begin burrowing under sheds. Eventually, millions break out into the wild.
Of all the domesticated livestock that I would put my money on in a world without people, probably the pig gets top prize. Pigs are omnivores. Basically anything that you can eat, a pig can eat. They're also very intelligent, and they're very good doers, meaning they can survive in a variety of conditions.
After escaping their confines, the barnyard pigs start breeding with the 4 million feral swine that live primarily in California, Texas, and Florida. The new pig hybrids become leaner, meaner, and more mobile, with larger tusks and more hair. Pigs will thrive, but many animals soon face a deadly virus. And in the cities, man's most majestic structures are becoming helpless amid nature's growing onslaught. 3 months after people. London's Buckingham Palace, the Queen's corgis have depleted the stores of food in the royal pantry and kitchen, which originally stocked food for banquets of up to 600 people and daily meals for a palace staff of 400. The corgis' only hope is to venture out into the city, and finding a way out of a building that has 775 rooms is only a matter of time. How will the cultured corgis survive?
I think the popular image of the corgi as a pampered pet incapable of moving by itself doesn't do it a good service.
Corgis were originally bred to be working dogs on Welsh farms, to round up herds of sheep and cattle, a genetic trait that will help them survive in the wild.
As a working dog, the corgi is able to move very well over frozen country. They've got sharp teeth, they've got an efficient digestive system. So these are all traits that will allow them to survive quite well, even in the absence of human protection.
Still, corgis would make a tasty snack for a bear or wolf. But the Queen's corgis won't have to worry about that. Both of those large predators have been extinct in the British Isles for centuries. There's another benefit to being a dog on the loose in a post-human Britain. Rabies was eradicated here in the early 20th century. In America, it's a different story. Pets lucky enough to escape their homes now face one of wildlife's most terrifying scourges. In the time of humans, more than 7,000 animals in America, about 90% of them wild, were annually infected with rabies. The virus ignites the nervous system and inflames the brain, causing an agonizing death. In population centers along the East Coast and in Texas and Arizona, oral bait vaccines were dropped by aircraft each year in hopes of suppressing the disease in such feral animals as foxes, skunks, coyotes, and raccoons. Without people to carry out the inoculation programs, an outbreak of the virus spikes by as much as 30% over the next several years. Among the infected, domestic cats and dogs that venture out and are quickly bitten by the wild rabid animals.
They go through a hyper-aggressive, hyperactive, almost madness, we could call it, a fury, where you get that characteristic frothing of the saliva at the mouth. Some dogs that are infected with the rabies virus have been known to actually bite up to another 100 animals.
One year after people, plants are on the rise in the city of Chicago. In Wrigley Field, America's second oldest ballpark, the iconic ivy is continuing to extend its green tendrils. These vines have flourished here since 1937, when they were planted to decorate and cover the outfield wall. With no groundskeepers around to give them their monthly clipping, the ivy threatens to overrun the whole stadium. But there is one thing holding it back. Each vine can only grow to a maximum length of 50 feet in the Chicago climate. However, as the vines shed their leaves each winter, that organic material sticks into cracks in the brick and concrete. It decomposes into soil, which in turn provides a higher platform for new vines to sprout. "5 years after people, the ivy has crawled up and blanketed the stands. It roots into the aging mortar, inserting moisture into cracks and breaking up walls. But the true victor in nature's race to reclaim Wrigley Field isn't the ivy. In the infield once prowled by the Chicago Cubs, Buckthorn, a thick, dense shrub, is taking over. It was brought from Europe in the mid-1800s and is one of the Midwest's most threatening plant species.
One of the ways that buckthorn is spread is that when birds eat the fruit of buckthorn, the fruit itself is sort of harsh on the intestines of the animals. It'll essentially have bird diarrhea. And so the birds, after consuming a crop of buckthorn fruit, will fly away and very quickly disseminate the plant.
In the time of humans, groundskeepers at Wrigley Field had to regularly mow and treat the grass with chemicals to prevent any of the seeds from taking root. But with no maintenance crews around, the dropped seeds from the birds quickly fertilize on the infield grass and begin sprouting a wild, woolly hedgerow that grows to 10 feet tall.
You won't be able to walk through it, never mind throw a ball in there.
"10 years after people, in downtown Chicago, the landmark 110-story Sears Tower is slowly deteriorating. After the Great Chicago Fire of 1871, the city began rebuilding vertically with new frames of steel. It was the birth of the skyscraper. Now, rainwater pools and rots the Sears Tower's roof. Moisture seeps down into the structure and begins rusting the bolts holding the giant glass and aluminum panels on the exterior. Freezing wind, rain, and snow off Lake Michigan violently batters the hulking structure. Some of the plates peel off the building and crash into the streets below. For now, the city of Chicago is still recognizable as a once great metropolis. But what will it look like 30 years after people disappear? To find out, we don't need a crystal ball. We just need to travel 30 miles away to another lakefront city where it's already happened. It's 30 years into a life after people. For a look into the future of lakefront cities like Chicago, one only has to visit Gary, Indiana. Though parts of the Midwest metropolis are alive and well, huge swaths have been abandoned. Gary, Indiana once had a thriving population of nearly 200,000 people. Then a slow, unfolding disaster hit.
Gary was founded in 1906 by U.S. Steel and was created as a company town for the industry. When the economy of U.S. Steel started to slide downward, the entire city just started to vacate and become abandoned. The city then became kind of known as the Pompeii of the Midwest, a city of ruins where you could walk down the street and there was no one here. It's just a city of decay.
Like Chicago, Gary grew because it helped link the Great Lakes to the Transcontinental Railroad system. But now, Lake Michigan is the source of its demise.
The weather in Gary is extremely tough because we're very close to the lake, which brings in a lot of humidity in the summer. And in the winter, it also brings in a lot of freezing rain and snow. We have a tremendous amount of freeze-thaw cycles, and it's not uncommon to get 30 or 40 freeze-thaw cycles a day in this city. And that literally just wreaks havoc on the buildings.
The constant expansion and contraction of moisture in the city's structures due to extreme temperature fluctuations, as much as 60 degrees in a day, with freezing ice, then melting water, can split walls like a jackhammer. Gary's train station, built in 1910, was a critical Midwestern hub for transporting steel freight and thousands of passengers. Hundreds of rail cars moved through here each day. "30 years of untamed nature have taken a frightening toll. Once the skylight shattered, the interior was open to a deluge of water. Moisture rusted the structure's steel supports, weakened the masonry, and caused parts of the roof to collapse.
This building would have been able to have remained in good usable condition had someone simply put a new roof on it, just kind of maintained the windows or boarded it up. But without that, the building is just being ravaged.
Once a place where people gathered for grand wedding ceremonies and solemn funerals, only a few blocks away from the train station sits Gary's most notable church.
This is the Gary Methodist Church that was constructed in 1925 for the Gary community. It had a population of about 3,000 parishioners. After the decline of Gary, it dwindled to less than 200, so it ceased being a church in 1975.
Once people fled, the routine maintenance like painting, carpentry, and plastering abruptly halted. Like the train station, water began collecting on the roof, rotting a hole in the ceiling.
The hole in the roof got larger and larger, allowing more and more water in, more freezing, thawing, cracking. It has completely deteriorated all of the roof beams and the roof rafters above us. All of the plaster is deteriorated, it's now on the floor.
Without the protective covering of plaster, the exposed brick attracts moisture and develops moss. Once weakened, it breaks off and begins raining down on the main floor of the sanctuary.
We've got a lot of mold growth that's evident on the bricks, and we're starting to see very small plants start to grow out of the bricks. So it's not long before those smaller plants turn into bigger plants that turn into trees that are going to deteriorate and damage the walls even further.
After 3 decades of battering from high winds, broiling sun, and freezing snow, the church is close to complete collapse.
It's amazing that when you can walk into a sanctuary of this size and originally imagine that there were 3,000 people that used to come and pray here and worship here, and now you come in and the choir lofts are falling off the walls. If you wanted to imagine what it would be like with life without people, you couldn't imagine or find a place more evocative than this. You just wonder what God hath wrought.
At the center of downtown sits the 3,000-seat Palace Theater, one of the most legendary old showplaces in the Midwest.
At its time, in 1925, it was just a wonderful theater. Obviously, all of that is gone now. It's not going to last much longer. small rodents and animals and dog packs have walked through this building and created two distinct paths from the outside in and inside out. It's not unlike when you walk into the woods or a large prairie that you see paths that were created by animals. All the young men in Gary used to be proud to bring their dates here, but now only the cheap seats remain.
The ruins of Gary provide a glimpse of life just 30 years after people. A harsh oracle for large lakefront cities like Cleveland and Detroit. And 50 years after people, nature has a few other fiendish tricks to topple some of man's most impressive structures. It's 50 years into a life after people. The descendants of the royal corgis still prowl the suburbs of post-human London. But they aren't a breed the Queen would recognize. After several generations of interbreeding with other dogs, any traits indicating their royal lineage are long gone. In only 5 decades, pampered pets have reverted to wild months. In the southern United States, kudzu is not only smothering the countryside, but invading Atlanta and its downtown skyscrapers and commercial structures.
50 years after people are gone, kudzu could certainly cover the Coca-Cola building and most of the major buildings in downtown Atlanta, provided that there was a starting point for them already there. And there is kudzu in small abandoned lots in Atlanta. Kudzu would begin to creep out of those sites.
After the kudzu vines die in the winter, the plant sends out new vines in the spring that use the old dead vines as a platform to keep climbing. The deep underground root network stores vast amounts of nutrients, which provides the plant with an inexhaustible amount of latent energy.
There could be vines 100 feet up the building, up any building. It's quite capable of growing that fast and that far and holding on tightly. There is no physical barrier short of a water or a creek or a river that would stop the growth of kudzu. So it would be the beginning phases of a green blanket covering parts of the South.
The Georgia Dome, Atlanta's premier sports stadium, must fight an opponent it has never known.
The weight of the vines alone on the roof of the structure would probably cause some collapse. They would cause the windows to break. It would certainly take off any awnings or shades or anything that was on the facade of the building.
The outbreak of kudzu sets the stage for an epic disaster. Even in the time of humans, Atlanta suffered from periodic droughts. Now, heaps of dry, brittle kudzu cover the city, creating a tinderbox. As a thunderstorm moves in, lightning strikes. And just like it did during the Civil War, Atlanta is burning again. The spreading inferno lights up the sculpted faces of the Confederate memorial on nearby Stone Mountain. In the city of Chicago, after decades of wild growth, Wrigley Field is almost unrecognizable. In the time of humans, the giant 85-foot-high wooden center field scoreboard was one of only 2 in a major league stadium to be manually operated, and was a charming throwback to a simpler time. But it's defenseless without humans to maintain it. Ivy repels up the scoreboard, as it crumbles under a siege of termites. Termites 1, Chicago Cubs 0. Down below, tangled thick nets of spongy buckthorn have grown to 20 feet high, shutting out the playing field. 100 years into a life after people. The elevated L train in downtown Chicago has been disintegrating for decades. In 1892, the first section of the elevated railroad, the second oldest in America, began moving passengers around by locomotive above parts of the old streetcar loop that surrounded downtown Chicago. Now, paint peels off the steel girders holding up the platform, and rust begins eating away at the exposed iron and steel. Bolts and rivets erode and crack, causing a shear break of some of the supporting beams.
As pieces start to fall, you would get distortion in the supporting members, and they would start to twist and fall and pull down other nearby members. So you start to have a domino effect as it starts to twist and fall, hitting the ground.
In London, Big Ben is covered with vegetation, its windows blown out, chunks of decorative stonework chipped away. The top of the iconic tower has always leaned 8.6 inches to the northwest. Over decades, with no humans to manage the water level in the Thames, the river continually floods the surrounding banks and rots Big Ben's foundation.
After, say, 100 years or so, the tilt within the tower will increase, and gradually the tower will become more and more unstable until finally gravity takes over and the tower itself collapses into the ground.
It's 200 years into a life after people. In downtown Chicago, the Sears Tower is finally beginning to totter. Decades of ferocious weather have battered this iconic landmark into a hollowed-out, honeycombed husk. The Sears Tower has 104 separate elevators with multiple shafts ending at different levels of the building. The cables rust and snap, but the elevator's brakes kick in. Eventually, the brakes corrode and they too give way.
You'll have these 104 elevators at different times, of course, come down those shafts, blasting through the floors like a bomb, cutting through the building, and of course further dragging down the floors and the structure around them.
Only 2 elevators connect the ground floor to the observation deck over a quarter mile above the street. One of the 3-ton elevator cabs free falls from the top floor, hitting the ground floor at more than 200 miles per hour, generating more than 1.5 million pounds of force on impact. But that won't be enough to topple this epic structure. Nature will need one final sledgehammer. Hundred years after people, the Sears Tower makes its final stand. What will break the building's back are the 114 pilings driven into the bedrock that hold up the structure.
The real Achilles heel in the Sears Tower is you've got 8 floors underground. And once you have a life without people, those floors are going to fill with water.
Chicago River flooding weakens the lower interior columns supporting the building, causing it to collapse.
It could finally reach a point where it just simply falls all at one time. Into one just giant heaping mass of twisted metal and concrete and glass.
Years after people, though the Sears Tower collapsed decades earlier, Chicago's 100-story John Hancock Center still stands. The Hancock Center owes its longevity to the unique crisscross X-bracings of steel beams that lace the structure of the building, giving it extra fortification. But with all its windows blown out and centuries of moisture corroding its steel framing, something's got to give. At the corner of the 85th floor, several crucial beams converge. One by one, they rust, bend, and fracture from the stream of water dripping down from the perforated roof. At a critical nook, a final beam cracks and shears off. The 15 floors above it start a corner-line cascade down the side of the building that then sets off a catastrophic floor-by-floor implosion of the whole edifice. 3 centuries after people, the rabies virus struggles to survive. The disease requires dense animal populations in order to spread. As domestic animals died off and wild animals dispersed from the fringes of the human settlements where they once scavenged, the virus could infect little more than several thousand animals per year. The outbreak is over. 5,000 years after people, only eerie reminders of our history remain. Stone Mountain, just outside Atlanta, is the largest piece of exposed granite in the world. 825 feet high and measuring 5 miles in circumference. In the 1920s, the United Daughters of the Confederacy raised enough money for work to begin on a massive sculpture of Southern Civil War heroes Jefferson Davis, Robert E. Lee, and Stonewall Jackson on the northern side of the rock.
Granite is without a doubt one of the hardest, most competent rocks, on the face of the earth. There's hardly a crack in the rock.
After nearly 50 years and several sculptors, the work was completed in 1972. The carved tablet is more than 1 football field long and is as tall as a 22-story skyscraper. After 5 millennia, 90% of the carving remains completely intact.
Just get the impression that this thing will be here forever.
But most of what man has built won't be. The great cities of Chicago, Atlanta, and London all arose because of their geographical proximity to the life-giving attributes of nature: rivers, lakes, fertile soil. Now, the silhouettes of these once thriving metropolises are vanquished. The rubble left behind, camouflaged beneath mounds, covered in dense vegetation, and swarming with wildlife. Nature has broken out and conquered. Man's cities have lost the battle in a life after people. What would happen if every human being on Earth disappeared? This isn't the story of how we might vanish. It is the story of what happens to the world we leave behind. In this episode of Life After People, America's capital is under attack. More than 2,000 miles away, the entertainment capital faces its own threats. At stake are national treasures. What will survive? Who might take our place? And could another capital of mankind emerge at sea? This is just part of a journey that will take us to the future of once crowded cities, as well as a haunting site already devoid of man. Welcome to Earth. Population 0. One day after people, in the rotunda of the National Archives building, the United States Constitution is now on permanent display. One day after people, there will be no one to send it on its nightly journey to the security vault. The parchment document is preserved in a shatterproof sealed encasement filled with argon, an inert gas that replaces oxygen and moisture-containing air that could wreak havoc over time. But how long can it protect our most precious document? Nearby, the Washington Monument, built with 82,000 tons of stone, is now free from the daily throngs of tourists. The U.S. Capitol building is now ghostly quiet. Abe Lincoln gazes on a pool that now reflects the absence of human life. In the time of humans, it took 350 Park Service employees to maintain the National Mall. It was already in need of $350 million in repairs and upgrades. How long can its crumbling infrastructure last? Washington, D.C. is threatened by a stealthy enemy.
Moisture is what we battle all the time when we're working on buildings or monuments of this type. It's what's going to act as an accelerant in terms of deterioration.
Water, once the key to human existence, now a threat to everything man has built. One week after people, in the entertainment capital of the world, the notorious Los Angeles freeways are free of traffic. The 73-story U.S. Bank Tower, the tallest building west of the Mississippi, was designed to be occupied for more than 100 years. It was also built to survive the big one, an earthquake measuring at least 7.5 on the Richter scale. But how long will it stand without human maintenance? We shall see. After people. In both the Washington, D.C. and L.A. zoos, the animals are dying. Elephants are frantic without humans to supply their vegetarian intake of 150 pounds per day. Using their superior intelligence and powerful trunks that can lift up to 600 pounds, they are able to break out.
Elephants are actually remarkably well equipped for operating in a world without people. They are able to defend against just about any predator that's likely to come their way.
Before humans appeared in North America approximately 13,000 years ago, it was mammoths, the distant relatives of modern elephants, that dominated the grasslands.
This is a group of animals that did very well indeed in the Americas before we got here, and there's every reason to expect they would do just fine again without us.
They begin new lives in the urban jungles. But will they be able to reclaim their old territory? Meanwhile, 2 weeks after people, 3,000 tons of garbage have gone uncollected in Hollywood. Some sewer systems deliver the garbage directly to the ocean, where it will add to a floating trash heap in the middle of the Pacific. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch, halfway between San Francisco and Hawaii, contains 3.5 million tons of nearly indestructible plastic waste, a floating dump twice the size of Texas. After people, how long will it take before the Pacific Ocean is free of man's garbage? Weeks after people. The impossibly lush image of Los Angeles is getting a facelift.
We see Los Angeles as a paradise, but it's a paradise we've created.
In the time of humans, LA residents used 137 gallons of water per person per day, with more than half that amount used to water lawns and plants. 87% of that water came from faraway places. For more than a century, a large percentage came from the Owens Valley, hundreds of miles to the north, through 2 aqueduct cascades.
This particular cascade is carrying about 125 million gallons of water a day, the major part of the water supply for the city of Los Angeles.
The water travels through a series of power generating plants. When the power plants stop working, the water backs up and begins creating new reservoirs, denying the city its main water source.
We think about life after people in Los Angeles. All of a sudden, there's nobody here to take care of it. No one to control the outflow of the reservoirs. No one to control where the water goes in the city.
One month into a life after people, LA is returning to its natural state.
Los Angeles really is a desert.
Now, The thirsty green lawns, trees, and manicured gardens are withering, setting the stage for a massive catastrophe soon to come. More than 2,000 miles away, the problem is quite the opposite. There's too much water in Washington, D.C. And the city is beginning to drown.
Life after people here in Washington, D.C. along the Potomac River will be a very different place. Water levels will be higher, floods will be greater, because more of that water is now flowing through the river rather than being taken away for showers and for bathing and for drinking water in Washington, D.C.
The failure of electric pumps beneath the city unleashes a deluge from the water aquifers, flooding the streets.
One problem with Washington, D.C. is that it was built with permanent-looking architecture on a swamp.
When the first settlers traveled up the Chesapeake Bay and came ashore, D.C. was marshland. Beaver dams shaped the Potomac River and created huge wetlands. In the time of humans, park rangers trapped and relocated beavers that gnawed on D.C.'s famous cherry trees. Now, the beavers are planning a return to power. Months after people. Across the Potomac, in Arlington National Cemetery, the eternal flame that marks the grave of President John F. Kennedy is in danger. The flame has been extinguished only once, in 1963, when visitors poured holy water directly over it. Now, a constantly flowing natural gas line with an electrically powered relighting system keeps the flame burning. But when the DC power grid fails, the electric relighter also fails. The first heavy rainstorm snuffs the flame for all eternity. It's now 6 months after people. Back in Los Angeles, while some animal populations are desperate for water, others are learning to adapt, including one blood-sucking scourge suddenly deprived of its human protein: mosquitoes.
We're sitting here in Los Angeles, a place with a lot of swimming pools. If people disappeared, these swimming pools would go into disrepair. There would be stagnant water. This would be a great place for mosquitoes to breed.
In the time of humans, when the wave of home foreclosures hit Southern California in 2008, West Nile virus cases more than doubled. To blame were the thousands of suddenly abandoned swimming pools, where the mosquitoes rapidly reproduced. A single stagnant pool can support hundreds of thousands of the pests. Within 1 year after people, the natural world is rapidly taking over the city streets. Soon, it will set off a chain of devastating events that will turn our great cities into capitals of destruction. It is now 1 year after people, and our nation's monuments are under attack. Towering some 550 feet, The Washington Monument is the tallest freestanding masonry structure in the world. The load-bearing walls are 15 feet thick at the base and 18 inches thick at the top. Completed more than 125 years ago, it was intended to endure for centuries. But even in the time of humans, the stone was already beginning to deteriorate.
We can see up close some of the deterioration that just happens on a regular basis. We can see the deterioration of the mortar joints and the patching that's been done over time. And this is a really good example here. We can see that even though this was recently renovated, we've already lost this material. So even in that short time span, the deterioration cycle is just ongoing. It's only 100 years of deterioration, but it shows the kind of loss of surface that we get and the kind of loss that we would imagine would occur as we move forward.
1 year after people, despite the neglect, the U.S. Capitol building appears unchanged. Even the dome, made of Civil War-era cast iron, is keeping out the elements.
The first year, you wouldn't expect to see much change. However, that cast iron dome is painted, and over time, the paint protective system will start breaking down. So you would expect to see some rusting starting to become visible as the iron is exposed from the paint.
Even the solid marble of the Lincoln Memorial is hinting at a future without human care. With no routine cleanings, the blocked drainage pipes are starting to cause cracks and water damage to the roof. The vertical span protecting Abraham Lincoln also contains steel beam reinforcement.
The tragic flaw is the roofing system. You'll have water penetration in, and where you have water and you have steel, you have corrosion.
Our national monuments remain under attack. Which one will stand the longest? It's 3 years into a life after people, and downtown Los Angeles is an overgrown metropolis. LA's famous freeway system has gone green.
The concrete itself would be relatively invisible within a very, very short period of time. The roadways themselves are great seed corridors. So the winds, the natural winds that we get, would drive a lot of seeds and other materials down those open corridors.
Grasses and other small plants quickly take over, and soon trees begin growing, their roots tearing apart the concrete. One decade after people, and Los Angeles is firmly on the path to becoming a desert once more.
Probably within a few years, you begin to see the non-native plants dying out and the native plants coming back and gradually taking over.
Without the aqueduct importing billions of gallons of water, the huge Canary Island palm trees lining the streets of Beverly Hills are now decaying trunks. This non-native tree was imported in the 1930s to add to the city's exotic appeal. But it requires an average of 30 gallons of water a day. And after 10 parched years, it slowly dies from the top down. Los Angeles is nearly unrecognizable. But it's nothing compared to what's coming. Wildfires can burn for weeks and even longer if the conditions are right. In 2007, the Zika fire in Santa Barbara County raged for 2 months, the longest burning wildfire in modern California history. Now, When a lightning strike sets off a fire in the hills, there won't be any firefighters riding to the rescue.
The mountain fires that we see virtually every year here in Los Angeles would penetrate into the urban setting, and you have the potential for a major fire event.
Downtown, the U.S. Bank Tower burns from the inside out. The structural steel frame withstands the searing heat. It can endure temperatures of over 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit without degradation. But the interior spaces burn quickly, turning LA's tallest building into a charred skeleton. The stainless steel panels of the Walt Disney Concert Hall are virtually fireproof, but the flames consume the plant life that grows between them. In Hollywood, the rotting wood of Grumman's Chinese Theater is engulfed in mere seconds. The foot and handprints of Tinseltown legends, formed in cement, easily survive the inferno. The Hollywood sign is engulfed as its acrylic latex paint feeds the fire. But the 50-foot-tall letters will survive the scorching. Although they look like wood from afar, they are actually made of steel. It's 50 years into a life after people. Now 200 years overdue, the big one, an earthquake measuring 8.0, hits Los Angeles. The U.S. Bank Tower is a charred, teetering steel skeleton. The top 21 floors have earthquake-damping struts installed between floors. But after wildfire damage and years without maintenance, they can't fend off the inevitable.
If you think about a bullwhip, a slight flick of the wrist will create a big motion out at the far end of the bullwhip, and it'll snap. Well, it's the same thing with the building. Part of the top of the building can just topple away because it's moving. It's the tip of the bullwhip.
Just a few blocks away, the 32-story LA City Hall is the tallest structure in the world, fitted with a base-isolated anti-earthquake mechanism.
What the base isolators do is they allow the building to remain relatively stationary while the ground shifts beneath it.
But the base isolators rely on rubberized bearings to absorb the shock and minimize vibration. After fire damage and 50 years without maintenance, the rubber has deteriorated. City Hall is doomed.
Despite the extra technology, nothing lives forever, especially in the Los Angeles basin.
That includes another cherished symbol of the big screen. The Hollywood sign is coming down. The quake shears off the corroded bolts that once held the letters securely to girders sunk into the bedrock. Faster than most American cities, Los Angeles is shaking off its human skin. But Washington, D.C. faces a much different fate. Years after people, the imprint of man is fading in some places, but actually growing in others. A water bottle from the California coast will float for many years before it's sucked into the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. The garbage patch is still expanding as more plastic refuse arrives from North America, China, and Japan. The century-old plastic materials will remain intact far into the future.
Because of the durability of some of the plastics that we have produced, we will actually see evidence of those outlasting the evidence of the substantial buildings that we've built in steel and concrete and timber.
After 1 century on permanent display at the National Archives in Washington, D.C., the Constitution is facing an invisible danger. The encasement seals are failing and allowing in air molecules. The oxygen content increases to 0.5%. But no known microorganisms can attack the parchment without at least 2% oxygen. So the documents will be safe for many more years.
You still would have a good, relatively airtight and moisture-proof container for the document.
The words of America's founding fathers will live on as long as the roof holds out. Over the last century, the beavers have been busy. New tree growth on the National Mall allows the creatures to build dams and cut new water channels from the flooding Potomac River. Across the wetland, the dome of the U.S. Capitol is rusting. With the paint long gone, moisture is forcing open the joints in the cast iron sheets. The openings attract pigeons and other birds. Because the dome is built atop an iron truss system, much like the girders of a bridge, it's an ideal nesting place.
The birds will build their nests there. When it rains, the rain will collect there. That nesting material will hold it like a sponge against the iron. The iron will continue to corrode.
Corrosion is also setting in on an iconic structure in Los Angeles. The Walt Disney Concert Hall was built with stainless steel, one of the most anti-corrosive metals. Its protective oxide layer keeps corrosion from occurring. After 100 years, the oxide is fading, and the silver panels are slowly changing to the color of dried blood. The Walt Disney Concert Hall is now a spectacular sculpture of rust. Corrosion is also pulling apart what's left of the freeway overpasses. And rain is transforming some parts into a water world.
A number of locations here in Los Angeles, our roadways are actually below grade. So when the water falls, we have to be able to collect it. We have drainage inlets like this in the roadway. The water collects in the drainage inlet, and it goes to pumps that pump the water out.
Now the inlets are clogged with debris, and the pumps stopped working long ago. So dozens of small lake ecosystems dot the freeways.
It'll be a gathering place for the animals, because animals will come down out of the adjacent mountains, and the freeway corridors are a relatively straight, easy shot for them to use to migrate from place to place. So it'll be actually a nice little reservoir.
But with the prey come the predators. The jumbled overpasses are now points of ambush. 150 years after people, the descendants of North America's zoo elephants are enjoying their life after people.
You could expect to see substantial herds within the first 100 to 150 years after the original pioneers break loose from the sanctuaries or from the zoos. A lot of the pasture land that will be left behind when we disappear would be ideal foraging country for elephants. And I think the elephants would have no trouble at all in making a living.
now 250 years after people. In Washington, D.C., the Lincoln Memorial is in dire straits. A few of the highly corroded steel roof girders snap. And the Lincoln statue is no more. Atop the weakened cast iron dome of the U.S. Capitol building, the 15,000-pound bronze Statue of Freedom is now the architect of destruction.
The statue's trying to pull on one side of the dome and push on the other side of the dome. That then means that the entire statue will punch down through the dome and it will all slump over like a wedding cake.
Centuries without maintenance have caused the rotunda of the National Archives building to collapse, exposing the U.S. Constitution to the elements. Still protected inside its casement, wind and rain are not the greatest threat. It's sunlight. The damaging ultraviolet rays cause ink to fade, and within a few years, the words are slowly erased from history. Years after people. The Washington Monument is losing the battle with nature. Its stone blocks chipping away with time. At the tip is a small aluminum pyramid.
When it was built in the 19th century, aluminum was a very precious metal. It was actually valued more than gold or silver. It was put up there essentially as a lightning rod.
In the 1930s, 8 copper rods were extended around the pyramid to help arrest the lightning. The aluminum pyramid outlasts the corroded copper rods, but it's lost its ability to channel lightning bolts. Lightning strikes the Washington Monument an average of once a year, a long-term threat to the pyramid. 500 years after people, the masonry structures of Washington, D.C. are failing. It is a future that has already happened 9,000 miles away at a mysterious site that was once a great capital of men. Six centuries into a life after people. In great cities like Washington, D.C., brick and stone are the only remaining markers of human architecture. How do we know this? The proof is found in another great capital city that people abandoned long ago. Deep in the interior of Cambodia, in Southeast Asia, 5 ancient towers rise like thistles from the surrounding jungle. This is Angkor Wat, the largest religious monument in the world. Surrounding it are dozens of smaller temple complexes. In 1860, a French explorer hacking through the jungle came upon these great towers. His journals would introduce the world to Angkor Wat. For more than 500 years, Angkor was the center of the Khmer Empire, a civilization ruled by all-powerful kings. Their drive to build stone monuments rivals that of the ancient Egyptians. The colossal stonework was all done by hand.
They are massive, as you can see, enormous size, and they probably weigh anything between 2.5 to 3 tons. These exceptionally fine joints, there's no mortar between them, they're just laid one on top of the other, and they're fixed by gravity.
Evidence indicates that Angkor Wat was abandoned nearly 600 years ago, in the year 1431, after enemy Siamese soldiers ransacked the temple.
Everything began to go downhill because there was no maintenance of these vast temples that required thousands of people to maintain them. Nature took over almost immediately, and within 100 years it was engulfed by forest.
Of all the temple complexes in the area, Angkor Wat is the best preserved. Most believe that a nearby community of Buddhist monks worked to save it from the jungle's grip. But the other abandoned temples in the area saw no human intervention for 600 years, and the jungle showed no mercy. Bangmalia is a smaller version of Angkor Wat. In 2002, the local authorities finally began to peel back the jungle. Nature had the temple in a death grip. On a daily basis, the temple's stone is being ripped apart by tree roots. At Bangmalia, it's the prolific strangler fig, a type of ficus tree.
So here is probably one of the best examples of the damage these trees can do. This is a ficus, and it always grows from the roof downwards. The birds like the seeds of this tree, and they eat the seeds, and the seeds will germinate in the bird's stomach, and then it'll excrete them out onto the top of the roof, and the seeds will then start developing, growing, the roots will come down into the ground, soak up an enormous quantity of water, and then slowly expand the roots. In this case, it's actually broken through the stone, and you can hear it's hollow, the roots come right the way through, and it causes untold damage.
The assault is relentless. In many cases, when the ficus tree grows old, a new ficus grows up and devours it.
Here you have a very good example of a ficus that is entwined around one of the old trees, the original tree here, and it's wringing the life out of it. And the tree is now actually causing a lot of trouble to the structure because it's got quite a sail effect. And once the winds go, it starts swinging around, and this causes an enormous amount of destruction.
At the nearby temple of Ta Prohm, silk cotton trees use their oversized roots to jack apart the stone blocks.
This tree is holding up this entire shrine. The roots are growing from beneath the shrine. Look here, for instance, where this lintel is separated from a window jamb. It's only hanging on an inch of bearing surface. I'd say in 2-3 years, at least this half of the building will be on the ground. This little plant is the culprit. The roots of the plant travel into the stone and the joints, seeking moisture and nutrients.
As the roots expand over many years, they pry apart the stone until a single load-bearing element dislodges and brings down the entire structure. Hundreds of years of unhindered growth has done immense damage. But one tiny insect needed only a few years to impose its destructive power.
I'm standing on top of a giant termite mound in the portal to a shrine. This thing must be 7 feet tall. It's an extinct population of termites. Certainly after abandonment of the site in the 15th century, they went to town, working, eating the wooden ceilings, furnishings, and fittings throughout the place.
Wildlife of all kinds inhabited these sacred stone monuments for centuries. When men moved out, the animals they most feared moved in. Even today, the deadly king cobra favors the temples closest to the encircling moats. In 2003, a hunter near Benmalia survived an attack by 2 Bengal tigers. The cats were reportedly living in the destroyed temple complex. Could the lessons learned from these deteriorating temples provide some insight into the future of a place like Washington, D.C.? 600 years into a life after people, without man to repair and protect his greatest monuments, nature will slowly and inevitably take sole possession. 600 years after people, the era of great collapses in mankind's capital cities is almost over. The previous centuries have witnessed the fall of man's houses of brick, wood, and our rigid towers of steel. The last recognizable edifice still standing in Los Angeles was the heavily corroded U.S. Bank Tower. The steel skyscraper survived the wildfire that charred the rest of Hollywood and much of the LA basin. The big one snapped off its top 21 floors. The lower 52 floors defied the odds for hundreds of years.
This building is an odd one in that it has a central core that's fairly stiff concrete, and it has a steel framing around the edges. The concrete core would have collapsed sooner if the building was in a climate that had more freeze-thaw cycles. But this doesn't really happen in LA. Earthquakes are what's going to get you.
A moderate quake finally brings down the weakened structure. Little has changed in the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. Over centuries, the sunlight causes the plastic to photodegrade into smaller and smaller compounds. Now, it's a poisonous stew containing immeasurable amounts of toxins like PCBs. Ocean creatures and birds continue to ingest the plastic soup, and the garbage patch lives on long after people. After 1,000 years, Washington, D.C. is becoming like the lost city of Atlantis. Centuries of sea level rise are finally drowning the evidence of a once great capital of men.
We'd expect a good portion of the mall to be underwater, and many of those monuments to be capsized, something like modern Alexandria today in Egypt, where a number of the monuments are underwater and capsized over.
Still above the waves are the ruins of the U.S. Capitol.
The various rooms in our Capitol would become exposed to the sky. It would start looking like what we see in Rome with the Forum.
The Washington Monument is no longer a proud structure. Erosion and the encroaching seas are causing the foundation to sink. Submerging is the only chance it has to survive intact.
The buildings, they're going to sink beneath the waves, they're going to get covered with mud, sand and silt, and those will encase the remains of the buildings and effectively fossilize them.
Atop the sinking stone edifice, the aluminum pyramid is discolored by lightning strikes, but still recognizable.
In life after people, after tens of thousands of years, that aluminum pyramid could be the last clearly man-made object left in our capital.
Unlike most naturally occurring metals, aluminum contains an oxide coating that protects and preserves it. On one side of the pyramid is the inscription, Laus Deo. Praise be to God. These could be our nation's final words to the future. What would happen if every human being on Earth disappeared? This isn't the story of how we might vanish. It is the story of what happens to the world we leave behind. In this episode of Life After People, invasive plants and predators are ready to strike. Pythons and alligators clash in deadly turf battles. Water weeds grow like cancers, stealing vital supplies of oxygen. And dust storms the size of mountains pummel defenseless cities. This is just part of a journey that will take us to the future of cities on the edge of civilization, as well as haunting sites already devoid of man. Welcome to Earth. Population 0. Humans have always battled invaders from nature, keeping thousands of invasive plants and animals at bay. But without people to fight them, they overrun old habitats. How long will it be until these invasive species conquer the world?
Without us, the immediate change in the natural world would be, you'd have to call it explosive. It's almost difficult to imagine the scale and the magnitude at which it would take place.
One day after people, the invaders are on the move. In the more than 2,500 square miles of marshes and swamps of Florida's Everglades, the ancient domain of the alligators is attacked by other cold-blooded giants, Burmese pythons. In 2008, more than 300 pythons were captured in the Everglades, just a small fraction of the estimated 30,000 of them believed to be slithering through the swamps. Burmese pythons were first brought to Florida as exotic pets, but many were set loose by owners who could no longer control the rapidly growing snakes.
You start off feeding them mice, then rats, then rabbits, and then you have to figure out what you want to feed them. 5 or 6 rabbits, or where do you get food for your snake?
The flesh-eating invaders, some as long as 25 feet, steal prey from the native alligators. In the time of humans, teams of government trappers tried to catch and remove them.
Without people, there will be no check.
With no humans to control their spread, can anything stop the pythons? There are more than 4,000 invasive species in the United States alone. Not just animals, but killer plants as well.
An invasive species is an organism, whether it's a plant or an animal, that comes from another region, usually another continent, and they have no natural predators, competitors, or parasites in the new habitat that they occupy. And so they're able to expand very quickly and become invasive.
Just 1 week after people, rivers and lakes from Florida to Texas are dying, as invasive weeds from South America multiply with no humans to clear them away. One plant, the water hyacinth, is a pretty purple flower with a dark side.
It sucks the oxygen out of the water, which doesn't allow native species, especially fish, to survive and thrive. So it could double its population in any given habitat in a week to 2 weeks.
Only people could control their spread. So now the invasive species are winning the battle by forfeit. Some of the most aggressive invaders are also the smallest. As many as 400,000 species of microscopic bacteria and mold spores attack everything that was once alive. Many of these organisms are so small, 250,000 could fit on the head of a pin, and they live everywhere. They begin to devour the organic matter, the food, the wood, the carcasses of animals left behind in the absence of man. Predators of the dead, large and small, are feasting.
Usually the first insects that'll be attracted to the body within a matter of minutes are flies. They can smell dead body from miles away. After a few days, then you start having other insects that are more carnivorous.
Other vermin attack living animals, including millions of dogs, who depended on humans to keep them healthy and who now must fend for themselves. Some breeds fare better than others. Days into a life after people. Some greyhounds have escaped from the more than 40 dog tracks around the United States. In Florida, one group of the hounds now roams free. Often fed raw meat to increase their competitive instinct when chasing mechanical rabbits, escaped greyhounds now hunt real rabbits, as well as rats. These dogs track with their eyes, not their noses.
Well, greyhounds are sight hounds, and they're used to hunting down their prey by running.
They also scavenge for food. But this often requires cooperation. And greyhounds have been trained to beat their competitors at any cost.
The dogs would begin to compete for that resource between each other. So there's going to be aggression, lots of fighting.
The streamlined greyhounds have thin skins and are easily injured. For them, the race to survive will be short-lived. While greyhounds clash in Florida, tiny invaders attack New York. The Asian longhorn beetle arrived in New York from China in the mid-1990s, probably stowing away in some cargo. They quickly started chomping on the trees of New York City, requiring a massive eradication effort.
They've got the beetle cornered, they've got it down on its last of its 6 legs. But if people suddenly disappeared, that beetle would again begin to spread. And of the 5 million trees presently in New York City, 2.4 million of them are susceptible to the Asian longhorn beetle.
The larvae of these 1.5-inch long insects are miniature biofuel factories. Fungus in their gut somehow helps them convert wood into energy, an attribute so unique that human scientists studied them for clues about how to derive ethanol from trees.
Once they get into the heart of the tree, they start boring along the length of the branches, and they create these dime-sized holes running along the length. Now you can imagine if you've got one dime-sized hole through a 12-inch branch or trunk, it's not a big deal. You get 30 of them, and all of a sudden that trunk is a lot weaker. You get 50 or 100, and it's hanging on by a few shreds of wood, and the first snowstorm or windstorm that comes along knocks your tree down.
Invasive species and extreme forces begin to reshape cities around the world. From India to China, from the beaches of Miami to the outer reaches of the Florida Keys, and right over the edge of the Grand Canyon. Across the desert, Phoenix, Arizona will face a cascading series of disasters. 1 month after people, the disaster begins as Phoenix is invaded by a heat wave set in motion by the people who once lived here. By paving the desert, the builders of Phoenix increased the area's average temperature by 15 degrees Fahrenheit.
It's been as hot as 122 degrees here in Phoenix at our airport with the tarmac just blazing.
Concrete absorbs about 60% of the sun's heat and light, but asphalt can absorb 95%, and because of its density, retains much of that heat even after dark.
We have what we call an urban heat island. When the sun goes down and that air is trying to lift from the pavement, it still stays really, really warm.
That heat speeds up the evaporation of the area's precious supply of water. In the time of humans, people made the desert bloom with treated wastewater.
This lake behind us is a man-made lake, built by bulldozers coming in, laying down rubber, plastic materials, and then adding more water to keep the lake at a constant level. So this is the water that comes from your dishwashers, your shower, your sinks. It goes to the treatment plant, and then it is treated and then used for landscaping, for irrigation, and discharged also to many of the rivers.
But without people, the wastewater plants have all shut down.
Things are going to die, and it's going to get pretty brown around here very quickly.
If the wastewater treatment plants stopped operating in a Phoenix without people, thousands of these man-made lakes would dry up within a matter of weeks.
Six months after people, the Phoenix Lakes